Hi there! Are you interested in building a storm deck and potentially focused on creatures and maybe even going mono green? In that case, there is such a deck called Selvala. What she does is using a lot of really cheap creature cards that comes into play for a really low CMC cost but has a really huge power. And that means that Selvala can use these creature cards as big rituals, but also drawing cards from them and digging through the deck. And a fellow YouTuber called Zodiac Games decided that he wanted to share his competitive Selvala deck here. If you want to see more of what he does, you can find in the description below a link to his page. In any case, take it away, Nick.
So, a little background. This deck obviously is not the oldest commander deck in the world, but it is definitely one of the more tiered commander decks in the world. Simple reason for that is mono green as a color, I guess we could all assume, is one of the strongest colors in the format. The reason that I chose Selvala primarily was for the simple reason this deck originated as mono green Omnath, which then went into trying to build Elf Ball, which didn't succeed because some of the cards that we would otherwise wanting to be played were, for example, banned, or some of them just honestly weren't as tiered powerful. So that's why I built this deck, and since then I've been playing this deck ever since this card literally came out, and I've had many games with this deck. The cards you'll see, even though they are all double sleeved, you'll see that some of the sleeves are a little wrinkled on the top just from general play, but the cards themselves are all this deck as a whole is what I would consider my baby. So every card you see will be a foil or one of the most expensive versions of this version of a card. Just like I said, simply because I love this deck and I think it's personally my baby. So, brief description about what Selvala does. Selvala, in key terms, is the engine of the deck. What she does, she is a 3 CMC, 2 green, 1 colorless, 2/3. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if that power is greater than each other creature in play. Now, right away, you can actually determine that this is going to be somewhat of a high creature-based deck, which of course in mono green you have expressed amount of creatures for, just for the simple reason that you have Hydras, you have cards that are exuberantly expensive in terms of CFC. They come down as 10/10s, 11/11s. You also have cards like, for example, the Eldrazi that are colorless, which are among the strongest and most highest power creatures in the game. And we do in fact run a couple in this deck, and for partly that reason, but those are mostly for our finishers. Secondly, and most importantly, its second ability. As a mana ability, it is a 1 green tap. Add X mana in any combination of mana to your mana pool where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So the trick with Selvala is bring her out as early as you can, and as soon as you do, put in another creature that, for example, might be a low CMC but has a high power, and then from there you can essentially combo off by going from turn 2 or 3, play Selvala, turn 4, play maybe a 3-drop that's a 5/5 or a 6/6, tap it, add 6 mana to your mana pool, turn 4, go into other things, have cards that can untap Selvala, and then presto, changeo, you have an infinite combo, you have a whole board full of things that you can cast, and each time you play these big creatures, don't forget you're also drawing a card. So every time you play a creature that's stronger than Selvala, more than likely on turn 3, you're going to be drawing a card, and every card after the fact that is stronger than the one that you put in previously. So that's Selvala. I will move on to probably the most important element of the deck. Now, the deck as a whole is a creature-based deck. Now, for that reason, this is all the creatures that we have in the deck. This I believe from my last count, comes out to be something like 25 to 30 creatures. So it makes up essentially a third of the deck, or close to it at least. All of these have a purpose. Cutting any card in here is with drastic thought, reason, and you'll see as we go through them. So one of the creatures that I would want to mention first is why I put on top would be Tamra Sabertooth. Relatively new card. This card came into play as a way for people to bounce their commanders if, for example, or any creature really, that is in threat of being destroyed because of a board wipe, and then Tamra Sabertooth protects itself by giving itself indestructible. The reason this is very relevant is because, along with multiple different ways in the deck to give haste, we can bounce our commander, put it back into play with the mana that we have on reserve, tap it especially again if it has haste, and essentially with its 2 activated ability cost not being a tap ability, we can continuously do this effect. It also works phenomenally well with creatures that have ETB effects. So creatures like, really the Eldrazi is a really good one that comes to mind. You can activate Kozilek's ability over and over and over again, draw your entire deck, or you can do, if Emrakul was legal, take infinite extra turns if you wanted to. But things like that are why this card is in the deck. Along with being a 4 mana for 4/3, it's an even conversion for its power, which is not the greatest in this deck, to be honest with you, as crazy as that sounds. But it works specifically for its activated ability, and there is no other reason that you would not want to run this card other than that right there. I would happily have paid 6 mana for this card with the same stats and everything just for that ability alone. So, alright, so next up we have Vorinclex, just as somewhat of a mid-tempo late-game finisher, so that way you can kind of lock down the board a little bit, so that way your opponents don't have to worry about, you don't have to worry about your opponents coming back up with something maybe the turn after. You can just kind of play your deck, hopefully win in the turn after, because after 2 turns or 3 turns, this card becomes somewhat irrelevant because your opponents can untap their lands. But the moment this comes into play, it's considered a huge threat, and people have to tap their mana to respond to it if it's not counterspelled. So either way, I would say for 8 mana, considering it's great. And for the fact that you can double your mana alongside that is just great mana curve. We have a lot of dorks in this deck. Actually, we run all the dorks that you could possibly think of as a 1-drop. A good example of this is we run Boreal Druid. It is a 1 green 1/1 that literally only taps for 1 colorless. This is absolutely awful in a 1 forest opening hand, but it is absolutely phenomenal in a 2 forest opening hand, because this is one of the ways that we can get out our commander easy. Along that train of thought, we have our Lanois elves, which is pretty synonymous with all elves in Magic. We have Wirewood Symbiote. Wirewood Symbiote being one of the key combo pieces that actually untaps our commander to add more mana to our mana pool at the cost of returning an elf to our hand to untap target creature. This also works on your opponent's turn when you would not really want to be using the mana ability in case your commander, for example, was being targeted for a destruction spell or anything like that. The reason you'd want to return Selvala to your own hand was so that way if you were to put it back in the command zone, you don't have to make it cost 2 more. It's just costing the original 3 mana that Selvala usually casts. So this is one of only, I believe, 2 X spells in our entire deck. Genesis Hydra is essentially Genesis Wave on a stick, but instead of it hitting all permanents, you choose from the top X card, you choose a card with CMC X or less, and you put that 1 permanent non-land into play. This works, honestly. As part of an X spell, we're getting the full value of being able to look for a deck, look for a key piece, put it into play, which is awesome. And then, of course, you also have the added advantage of having a really strong creature, because it is really easy to get to maybe 10 power on turn 3, 20 power turn 4. You got yourself an 18/18, 8/8, whatever you want it to be in play, and you get something else for free. So in this deck, as a Hydra, I don't run many, but this one works. Then we have Nylea. Nylea is one of the first that I would say is evident in terms of its power ratio to its CMC. Now, obviously, if we all know Nylea, she doesn't become alive unless you have 5 devotion to green or more in play, which, by the way, is very easy in this deck. Selvala alone is a 2 green devotion in her own ability right there. So you just need to put 2 more creatures, which you really should be having with all the mana dorks that you have. So it's really easy to make her a 6/6. But what makes her great is that she's a 4 power 6/6. You put her in turn 3, turn 4, tap Selvala, add 6 mana to your mana pool. You can then start the train. That with the added benefit that she can give all your creatures trample when that key time comes, and also she can actually give essentially a green fire breathing where it's 3 mana, 1 green, so 4 mana in total, activated ability, but it's a repeatable activated ability. You have +2/+2 and trample to target creature. Woodland Bellower is one of the other key combo cards. Every card in here is a key combo card, but there are some more than others. This is probably what we go find more often than not for our 6 CMC slot. It will then ETB, go find a creature CMC 3 or less and put it into play. With cards like Tamara Sabertooth that I showed before, where it takes advantage of those ETB effects, this can essentially go find, if given the right amount of mana and able to untap Selvala appropriately, can go find every CMC 3 or less from your deck and just put it into play like that. So, again, for that reason, that is why that and Tamara Sabertooth are one of the key combo cards in the deck. Another finisher we have is Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger. Ulamog Ceaseless Hunger, one of the more recent cards that comes into the deck, obviously from the fact that it's from a newer set. It is a 10 power 10/10. It is a finisher as you cast the card, so not as it ETBs, but it's still casting important with, especially with Tamara Sabertooth in the deck. We exile 2 permanents, which is scary enough as its own because it's like having a second Terrastodon in the deck, except there's no downside because we don't give them any creatures. And also, on the attack, your opponent has to exile the first top 20 of his deck. So, low win condition right there. Mostly use it for its getting rid of cards ability, which, again, happens, but, it is important when it does. Alright, Eternal Witness. Probably one of my favorite ways to win in this deck is to Genesis Wave into an Eternal Witness, have enough reserve mana to then Genesis Wave again in the same turn. Eternal Witness, get back a card from your graveyard. It's a utility card. It's not an elf, which doesn't really help us all that much in the long run, but for what it does and being as powerful and how beautiful I love this foil, I couldn't resist putting this in the deck. Kieran Ranger. So another combo card. It's a 1 mana elf, 1/1. Return a forest you control to your hand to untap target creature. This is another way that we untap Selvala. A better way. And it is honestly even better when you think about sometimes where you have a land in play, you haven't drawn your land for turn, you return a land to your hand that you already have tapped, put it into play for land for turn, and have another reserved mana in your mana pool. Chronos, another key card that came into the deck. Very similar to Nylea, obviously with the fact that it's essentially a functional reprint of Nylea, but in standard. It is a 3 mana 5/5. The only upgrade actually to this card versus the other card is that it doesn't come in as an enchantment. It is a creature as it enters the battlefield. So we don't have to worry about devotion, we don't have to worry about anything like that. And it's a 5/5. So we still have that uptick in power that will work with Selvala. Plus, when you do have enough power, it becomes a Death Touch indestructible blocker, and it does have a similar fire breathing-esque ability for green. 3 green, give target creature trample and +2/+0. Reclamation Sage, a card that we can use as utility, blows up target enchantment or artifacts. Great card, utility card. Not much really else to say about it. It's a 3-drop which can be found with Woodland Bellower. Yeah, it's a good card. Lanois Druid. Now, Lanois Druid is one of my personal favorites. I don't see a lot of people play him outside of Marin or black-green strategies where they can reanimate him over and over again, aka Marin. But simply what he is a 1 green, 1 colorless, 1/2, tap, sack, Lanois, untap all forests in play. Now, obviously, this isn't great if you're going up against a mono green player, but it is great, especially if you can play this turn 2 or turn 3 or whatever, and you have a really big hitter in your hand, but maybe Selvala has been killed for multiple reasons. This is essentially a one turn, you get double mana. And honestly, I have no problem with giving my opponent the access to having more potential green when I know that I'll be the 100% benefactor, getting all the love and joy out of everyone in the table when I untap all my lands and maybe they untap one or two. So in my mind, this is a great card for this deck. It ramps me the hell out. It has honestly sometimes even won me the game when I need it the most. So great card. I honestly think people should be running this more. And for the fact that it's a quarter, it's worth it. Script Ranger. Another functional copy of a card that untaps Selvala, except for this one has the ability of being 1 green, 1 colorless, 1/1. It has flash, so that way you can, for example, untap your commander at instant speed, which does sometimes come relevant. Protection from blue, a good blocker, if not a good swinger, if you are able to pump him, which you can, obviously, with like the Elixirs and the Chronuses of the deck. Return a force to your hand, untap target creature. Easy peasy. Killer Bee. So this is another fire breathing on a card. The reason that it is whiteboarded is because I have not found the Legends version of this card. I am still looking for it. But semantics aside, it is a 3 mana, 2 green, 1 color, 0/1 flying. So really the reason we run this card is not for any of those abilities. Maybe the flying, but it's really its other ability. It has the activated ability cost of being able to pay 1 green. This creature gains +1/+1 until end of turn. We put 20 mana into this creature. It becomes a 20/21 swinging with flying. Not only for that, also added ability that putting mana into this creature and having Selvala in play can add more mana to it. So that 20 power automatically just becomes 40 as a swing for kill. Oracle Moldiah, a very famous commander card, helps with that mana ramp, helps with getting the land off top of the deck. Kind of sets you up for future delayed late game plans. Good card, good commander card, is an elf, so it does help with some of those strategies where elves do become relevant in the game. Terastodon. Now this is probably the most hated card I have in the deck, simply for the fact that he is aka kill your lands creature, because essentially that's what he does. He's the green creature of the deck, 9/9. Enters the battlefield, destroy up to 3 target permanents, and in response to those 3 permanents that you destroy that are non-creature, non-planeswalker, your opponents get a 3/3. This is probably the extent and the most extreme case of the whole mana curve to power ratio that I have in a card. The reason for that is I have Phyrexian Dreadnought in the deck. The way that Phyrexian Dreadnought reads, to someone who doesn't know the card and know how mana abilities in the stack work, would seem completely useless in this deck and would otherwise be completely pointless. But what he does, he is a 1 mana 12/12. That's right, a 1 mana 12/12. Sorry if you're reading that backwards. He is a trampler as well, not forgetting. And when he enters the battlefield, I have to sacrifice up to 12 power worth of other creatures to keep him in play. Now, you might be asking, why on earth would I have this card in my deck where I would have the ability to sack my creatures? The reason for that is simply, as a mana ability of what Selvala has in herself, and also for the fact that you'd be playing a 12/12 to draw a card, the way mana abilities work, activated ability on the stack of the trigger ability to sacrifice 12 power worth of other creatures, you tap her, paying the 1 mana for Phyrexian to cast it, 1 mana to tap Selvala. You now have 12 mana in your mana pool to play with. Phyrexian Dreadnought automatically dies. We don't care about him going to the graveyard because he is literally a 2 mana from Phyrexian Dreadnought casting to Selvala being in play and activating her ability. 2 mana, 12 mana. That's pretty good. Simply another elf. We got Finhorn Elves. Can't stress the importance of having every 1-drop, 1/1 dork that we can have in this deck. Super important. Art in this card is honestly not my favorite, but it's better than the old one, so it could be worse. Craterhoof Behemoth. Obviously coupled with the next card, which I'm going to show, which is Avenger of Zendikar. This is a classic EDH combo win kill. If you want to kill your opponent like that, and just do it in such a stylish way, go ahead, because there is no other way that you can do this, especially with having all the 1/0/1 swinging in for what could be 7 damage the turn that you swing with Crater Hoof, along with every other creature you have in play. Alright, continuing down the dork train, we have Birds of Paradise. Can't beat it. Taps for green, is a flyer. It's okay if you give it flying and you fire breathe it to death with Ronus, Natalia, etc. Could be a way to win. I've done it before, but it's otherwise just a dork. Kozilek. So, interesting interaction with Kozilek. So, if Kozilek, again, is the strongest creature in play that when you cast it, which, again, it more or less likely is, as it enters the battlefield, you cast it, you draw the 4 cards. With Selvala in play, this 2-little combo right here can actually sometimes make you draw 5 cards. That actually happens more often than not, especially when you're casting Kozilek, which in this deck, we don't really put things into play all that often. We maybe do it once or twice a game, in relative speaking to all the other creatures that we play. But this card comes in, is cast more likely than not for the simple draw 5 potential of the deck. Also for the fact it's an Annihilator 4. Yeah, again, can't really beat that. And for the ability to, when it hits the graveyard, shuffle in your library, so you can never really deck yourself out with a mill player or anything of that regard. Fierce Empath. This pretty much goes find Kozilek, if I'm being 100% honest. That, or it goes find Woodland Bellower, or it goes find any other 6 or higher creature in the deck. Alright, again, in the same line of thought of Phyrexian Dreadnought, I have Phyrexian Soul Gorger. Is a 3-mana, 8/8. It has the cumulative upkeep of sacrifice a creature. Now, again, you might think this is awful, but if you think about it, 3 mana, 8/8. Play this turn 4, maybe play this turn 5, maybe even play turn 3, actually. You play it, Selvala has the ability to tap for 8. You have 8 mana floating in your turn. You cast other things. The next turn, yeah, you can sacrifice a creature to keep this alive, or you can just sacrifice this as a creature and not have to worry about it. It's essentially a functional reprint of Phyrexian Dreadnought. Not as good, obviously, but it's still in the deck for a reason, so that way we can get that consistent mana curve going up and up and up, with the ratio going down, down, down. Elvish Mystic. Another elf, another tap for 1 green. What else can we say? Priest of Titania. So, Priest of Titania is probably the only card in the whole deck where it actually matters that you have an elf, or the amount of elves that you have in play, where it literally says add 1 green to your mana pool for each elf in play. If you have her and Selvala in play, that alone just creates 2, because Selvala, remember, is an elf scout. If we have other elves in play, which the deck is riddled with, 4, 5, 6, and this card can go infinite actually with the likes of Umbra Mantle if you have enough elves in play. So think about the next time you play Priest of Titania, it can go infinite. Omnath Locus of Mana. Now, remember how I said that my first original mono green deck was Omnath Locus of Mana? I wasn't going to forget about this guy too easily. He is probably one of the more insane powerhouses in the deck. He's a 3-mana 1/1. And again, you wouldn't necessarily think that's a good conversion, but when you consider his ability, again, it's insane. Green mana doesn't empty from your mana pool. Omnath Locus of Mana, power and toughness, gets +1/+1 for each green mana in your mana pool. So you float 10 mana in your mana pool, Omnath Locus of Mana all of a sudden is an 11/11. So you have him in play, you have Selvala in play, he's a 10/10, tap Selvala, automatically gets another 10 mana to your mana pool, or 11 mana to your mana pool. He then automatically becomes a 20/20. Plus, when you cast him, depending on how much mana you have in reserve, you cast him, and his power is a reflective of how much mana you have in your mana pool. So, as he enters the battlefield, he could be a 10/10, which would then trigger Selvala's draw mechanic. Again, another synergistic card in this deck that is there for a reason. It's an insane card. I love this card so much. I will never take this out of any mono green deck that I have. It's the nuts. It really is. Alright, Chronos. Now, honestly, one of the cards I'm thinking about putting on the chopping block, but honestly, considering what it does, again, 4 mana, 5/5, it hits that ratio that we want to see. It has an XX green monstrosity ability, and if you know monstrosity, I would say go look it up. But essentially, pay X into it. You get X amount of counters added onto Chronos with added abilities, which are usually reflected in the card's second subtext, Oracle text. I'm sorry. He has the ability when he becomes monstrous, it deals X damage divided as you choose amongst any number of creatures that I don't control, and it then fights those creatures. Which can essentially mean, depending on the amount of mana that I have in play, or if I have infinite mana, I can essentially wipe the board with this creature. I'll be honest with you, I don't really use that effect all that often. I mostly just use him for his 4 mana 5/5 conversion, but that alone is not the best. Alright, and lastly, the last creature in the entire deck that we have to show, maybe, winky face, is Arbor Elf. 1 mana green, 1/1 untapped target forest. There we go. Alright, so obviously you can't really cast anything in the deck without lands, so of course we have to go into lands. So the amount of lands that I have vary depending on what you want. This is also probably the area of the deck which I love the most because as a collector, I love having all cards of the same color, and for the simple reason I love the art of Unglued. I have, what is this, 27 copies of the Unglued Forests. So, 27 lands with the rest of these other lands coming into focus right now. So, this is obviously a mono green deck. We're going to have a lot of mono green permanents. First land that we're going to want to use almost every time is going to be Nykthos. This is essentially the Cabal Coffers Urborg in the deck. Add that much green of devotion to your mana pool that you have in play. It's insane. You have any more than 2 devotion in play, so 3, 4, 5, this automatically becomes worth it. So, yeah, I don't see any reason to not run that card. After that, probably we're going to have Dryad Arbor. I said that we were going to maybe have one more creature in the deck. The reason we have this card in the deck, very simply, is we won Green Sun Zenith, and we Green Sun Zenith for 0 all day long with this bad boy. Any other reason that we play this card other than the fact that I love this art, even though this art might be getting this card banned soon, whatever. I love this card. It's worth a shot in almost every mono green deck. Reliquary Tower. The amount of cards that we draw in this damn deck is insane. Not only for the simple reason that we have infinite ways to draw our entire deck, but with cards, for example, working with Selvalla's first latent ability to draw, it works. It works out almost every time that you want it to work out. Homeward Path, a little added protection to take back almost any of your permanents back from an opponent that they might be controlling. If they gain control of Selvala, honestly, it's game over. Unless we have this card in play where we take back our stuff and we don't really ever have to worry about like Control Magic or any of these other type of latent spells. We can just tap Homeward Path, take back our permanents, and yeah, honestly be done with it. We're going to play Wirewood Symbiote. Okay, the other card in the deck that actually worries about whether or not you have an elf in play, it is a tap, add 1 mana to your mana pool, or pay 1 green, untap target elf. Obviously, we'd be using this to untap Selvala. No other reason but to use this card, but to untap Selvala. Maybe we might be using it to untap Priestess Titania. Second to last card is probably going to be Yamavire Hollow. I've owned this card for a very long time, and obviously for the simple reason that it's foil and on the reserve list is kind of astonishing to me sometimes. But it is a add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool and pay 1 green, regenerate target creature. Someone blows up the field, regenerate target, aka Selvala, have it round for next turn. It's 1 green. Saved my ass so many times. Totally worth running in the deck. Automatic, yes, 100%. Okay, so last land that I have in the deck is also the, in terms of the most wow factor card of the entire deck, is going to be my Gaia's Cradle. Is going to be my Foil Judge promo Gaia's Cradle. You can't really run or have a mono green deck without Gaia's Cradle, especially in Elves. This card is essential almost every single time if you were to play or run an elf deck. Add 1 green mana to your mana pool where X is the amount of creatures you control. After lands, after creatures, we have probably my favorite section, artifacts. For no deck would be complete without a Soul Ring. And this is not actually the Soaring I want the Judge promo Soaring, but Soaring nonetheless. Important card, needs to have it in every deck. Lightning Greaves, automatic equip to Selvala, gives it haste on the occasion when we need it. Next we have 1000-Year Elixir. 1000-Year Elixir has the fun ability of allowing creatures that have activated abilities to actually have haste. Now, this is, of course, very important with Selvala. She comes in. This is already in play. You have that 1 extra green mana and a huge-ass creature in play. You can tap that 1 mana without essentially giving her haste. This is a pseudo-haste to tap and add mana to your mana pool. And it has the ability to pay 1 tap, 1000-Year Elixir, untap target creature. This is literally the embodiment of everything that we want to do in this deck in an artifact. Next, and of course, with this kind of deck that we have that goes untapped for mana, we have Paradox Engine. I mean, one of the more recent cards from Aether Revolt. Can't really beat it. Insane magic card, let alone commander card. Birthing Pod, 4 mana card artifact that is colored green, which does come up on occasion, obviously, but it has a 3 colorless, 1 green Phyrexian mana, so you can pay 2 life to rather cast this card. And then you have the added ability of pay 1 colorless, 1 Phyrexian tap. Sacrifice a creature, put a card from your deck into play with CMC 1 greater than the card that you used to sacrifice. So use this to sacrifice a 5/5, go find a 6/6, such as Woodland Bellower. You can only activate this anytime you would cast a sorcery. So if you have any way to untap this card, aka Paradox Engine. Okay, now, kept the best 3 till last, but also so that way I could show you them all in unison. Because these artifacts are among the easier ways that we go infinite in the deck. Now, Umbral Mantle. Doesn't need anything else in the deck to go infinite other than Umbral Mantle and Selvala and 3 mana on top of what you're using to tap Selvala to make 4. Tap Selvala, untap Selvala, have that 1 mana floating, gets an automatic bump of 2. So Selvala is now a 4/4, pay that 1, get a 4 mana to your mana pool, use it to untap Selvala. Selvala is now a 6/6. You have 1 mana in your mana pool, and you essentially go infinite in that regard. Staff of Domination. The way we go infinite with this is have this in play, Selvala in play, and a creature that is 5 or greater in power, and you just go tap Selvala for 5, activate Staff of Domination, which is untap target creature, have that 1 reserve mana to tap Selvala again, pay the 1 extra mana to untap Staff of Domination, go infinite. It's easy, it's quick. And then finally, Sword of the Prunes. This is probably the worst of all 3, but it still goes infinite, so we run it, of course. 4 mana, it has the ability to pay 3, tap or untap target creature, and then it also has the other ability to equip for 3. So, all in all, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 mana artifact that when it gets going, you win infinitely by having a strong creature in play that is, for example, what would that have to be, 5 again, power to go infinite in play with Selvala, or it does have the other abilities to, as long as a equipped creature is tapped, all your creatures get +2/+0, and then when it's untapped, all your creatures get +0/+2. So that part doesn't really matter so much to us. We more so just care about the last 2 abilities to tap and untap or equip. So those are the 3 ways that we go infinite. Thing to know with Staff of Domination, this not only allows you to go infinite with mana, but also enables you to go infinite with life, infinite with draw your whole deck. This is probably the better one of all of them, other than the fact that Umbral Mantle can also give infinite power to one of your creatures and then transfer it over to a mana dork, do the same thing, give it infinite power, and then you have 2 creatures that are essentially infinites and swing, and you probably win at that point. Alright, sorceries. Now, sorceries pretty much consist of 2 things. They either consist of mana ramp, or they consist of cheating things into play from your deck. You usually only get to do this once or twice a game, the cheating things in from your deck into play, but when you do it, it is a whole bundle of fun. Obviously, for that simple reason, the first one that we have to show and showcase is going to be Tooth and Nail. Old Art Tooth and Nail because Old Art Tooth and Nail is best. Choose one to either put two target creatures from your hand into play, or put two creatures from your library into your hand, or you can entwine to do both abilities. Natural Order is probably the card that says, go find Terrastodon. Yeah, go find Terrastodon is essentially what this reads. It doesn't really, it's a 4-mana sorcery, sacrifice a green creature, go find a green creature from your library and put it into play. AKA, go find Terrastodon. Nature's Lore, put Forest into play untapped, is what this reads. This can be Dryad Arbor, honestly, that is probably what I use it for most, especially when I have Gaia's Cradle in play. You use this, get it into play, and then, yeah, just start rocking and rolling in mana. Green Sun Zenith, not only a card that goes finds Dryad Arbor again, but also a card that is can go find any card, really, that you want. To be honest with you, go find Kozilek, go find Terrastodon, go find whatever you want. It is very unilateral. Selvala Stampede. You run Selvala, you have to run Selvala Stampede. Also for the simple reason, Selvala Stampede is an insane mono-green card. Around the table, this is probably a multiplayer, better enforced card, but even with just 2 players, it still works out probably in your favor more often than not, and you wouldn't really play this if you didn't have something to play, or if you weren't desperately looking for something from your deck to put into play to then gain the upper advantage on your opponent. Then we have Genesis Wave. It is a 3-mana X ability. Go put X from the top of your library and put X or less into play. All permanents except instant sorceries go to the graveyard. Harmonize, 4-mana, draw 3 cards. Sometimes drawing in this deck can be a little lackluster, but more likely or not, we're going to get exactly what we need 99% of the time. So, either way, it's important to have this in the deck just in case. Regrowth, functional Eternal Witness, but on a sorcery speed. It helps. It helps almost in every way that you could possibly think that you might need to return something to your hand from your graveyard. Your commander, a land, a fucking creature that got destroyed, a sorcery, anything that you could possibly need to get back from your graveyard if it got mailed or whatever. It's important to use. 3 Visits, another functional reprint, a functional expensive reprint of Nature's Lore. Eldritch Moon, another essential reprint of Natural Order. Just 1 mana less, sacrifice a creature, go put a creature that's CMC 2 greater than the CMC of the card they used to sacrifice. So sacrifice a 4/4, go find a 6 or less. And then probably the most anti-commander fun card ever is probably Triumph Report. This is a win condition in itself. Give your creatures trample, +1/+1, and infect for 4 mana. Last 2, we have instances and enchantments. First card that we're going to review for instance is going to be Worldly Tutor. Only reason that this card is in the set that it is because this card has not come in foil yet. Wizards, what are you doing? What are you doing, Wizards? Come on. So yeah, go instant speed, go put a creature from your library and put it on top of your deck. End of your opponent's turn, anything you want, not Dryad Arbor, whatever you want is what this card says. So use it smart. Curse and Grip, because you can't have utility without Curse and Grip. Destroy target artifact or enchantment at split-second speed instant. Yeah, you think you're about to go off? No. You think you're about to tap Temple Bell and Mind Over Matter for infinite draw? No. You think you're going to tap Angus Mackenzie to Fog? No. Or, yes, actually. Sorry, because that's a creature. But, essentially, you get the point. Activated abilities, this supersedes it. Destroyed the target artifact or enchantment. Insane card. Never try and have this go against you because in my deck or in Selvala decks, enchantment and artifacts are super important. So, yeah. And I love this art, too. This art is probably one of the most insane arts for this deck, but it's cool. Alright, Beast Within. Again, another functional reprint of a utility card. 3 mana, 3/3, destroy target, permanent, and give them a 3/3 beast. It's a dumbed-down version of Terrastodon, is what it says. Berserk. Now, this is one of the more tricky cards that we use in the deck. When people first see Berserk, they're like, oh, you're just going to use this to swing out someone, give it trample, deal all the damage. And yes, you can do that for this reason. But in Selvala, there's a trick that you can play. Because with Berserk, what people don't really realize majority of the time is that for the creature to die after that you've given it double power and trample, it actually has to swing. Now, the reason that that's important is because with Selvala, all you care about is power. So if this card in 1 mana green gives it instant speed, or your cards, one of your creatures that's maybe like a 5/5 or whatever gets double power, tap Selvala, you're getting double mana just off this one card. And you don't even need to swing. You can, if you want to, and you want that card to get destroyed, which, again, if you want to, that's your call. But you don't have to. Especially if you couple this with, for example, an Nylea or a Ulamog, the one that we have that's indestructible. This doesn't say sack. This says destroy target creature. Those creatures are indestructible. So yeah, this card is an interesting card. Also for the fact if you really don't want your opponent's creatures to be in play that much, but you don't mind taking a little life from the hit of it, you can target one of their creatures, give it double power and trample, but just have it die on their attack. It's a weird one drop, but it works. It works more often than people think it does. Chord of Calling. Go find a creature CMC X or less from your deck, and it has Convoke. Go find any card that you really want. Go find a card that makes you infinite. Go find a creature that destroys your opponents, aka Terastodon. Benefactor's Drought. Instant speed. Untap all creatures you control. Obviously, that is super relevant with Selvala. Selvala needs to be untapped to tap for mana, and it also has the added 2 abilities that if any of those creatures that were untapped were to be blocked in an attack, each one of those creatures that were blocked, you get to draw a card. And as a third partition, at the very end, it lets you draw a card off itself alone. So it's 2 mana, untap target creature, all creatures you control, aka Selvala. Potentially draw cards on the block. But either way, this is a draw card in green instant. And finally, we wouldn't be playing Gyre's Cradle without our crop rotation. 1 mana, instant speed, sacrifice a land, go put a land from your deck into play untapped. Alright, we're going to round this tutorial off with our last 5 cards of the deck. Now, the last 5 cards of the deck are enchantments. I have seen versions of this deck where people run absolutely no enchantments, and that's absolutely okay in my opinion. I choose to have these as utility or as getting things going a little faster. So, first card that I'm going to showcase is Sylvan Library. Sylvan Library, again, draw 4 cards. Draw 3 cards in your turn at the cost of 8 mana is essentially what this says. So, that or rearrange the top 3 cards of your library to draw the card at the beginning of your turn every single turn. Greater Good. Now, this card is really, 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 really good, especially with the idea that we're going to keep drawing our entire deck with really strong creatures so that way we can get the cards that we want from our deck into our hand. And we don't even really care about you have to discard 3, because especially with Kozilek in the deck, we can just discard it and then reshuffle everything back into the library. Honestly, for the 4 mana that it cost me and being a late game tempo card, it's worth it. Song of Dryads. Now, Song of Dryads is one of those utility cards that a mono green deck, if you want to try and not die immediately, you probably should be running. Simple for the reason, target permanent becomes a forest, a colorless forest. And it loses all abilities, it loses all power, toughness, anything. It just becomes a colorless forest. Hollow Gemstone. Now, I have debated about turning this card into City of Traders, but essentially I think this card does essentially the same thing. The reason I say that is because it's a 3 mana enchantment world, so kind of important, I guess, especially if you're going up against someone with an old cards too. During each player's upkeep, that player chooses a color, aka I choose green every single time. Until end of turn, each mana producing land produces mana of the chosen color instead of its normal color. Now, what's cool about this card is if it's your opponent's turn and they're multicolored, they're stuck only choosing 1 color. Artifacts don't count in this equation, it's only lands that this affects, so they can get around it a little bit. But let's say, for example, they don't have any signets in play, they tap their mana or their lands to produce mana, they can't do anything about it. So they tap their lands, they tap all of their dual lands or whatever, and they can only produce like black or green of 1 color. Also, what's insane about this card, and the reason that I consider taking this out for City of Solitude, is that on your turn, you're always going to be choosing mono green. Your opponent's lands can only produce mono green. All lands in play can only tap for the color of the chosen color of the upkeep of the person whose turn it is. So you choose mono green, your opponent's mono blue lands for aka counterspell magic can no longer tap for mono blue. They can only tap for mono green. So that means that you have a 3-drop enchantment that screws your opponents in lands, keeps your things potentially uncounterable, and it doesn't do anything against you. 2 more cards to go. Exploration. You may play an additional land per turn at 1 green. Card is aka essentially another 1-drop dork, especially if you have more than 3 lands in your hand at the beginning of the game. You can essentially cast your commander turn 2, which is essentially what a 1-drop dork would be doing anyway, but this is an enchantment. And it can help in future matchups, especially when you need to return a land that you pop back to your hand with, for example, any of the land popping back abilities that we have in this deck, to play it again as a 2nd or 3rd time. So in general, I always like to have a copy of this card in any mono green deck. In really any deck that has green, it's a good safe way to just ramp yourself out. And especially with the amount of lands that we have in the deck, it can become important. Alright, the last card in the entire deck is Concordant Crossroads. Another 1-mana enchantment. It got eroded to essentially say all creatures have haste. And with that being said, this is Selvala Deck Tech. Have a great day. Bye bye.